Hello, and welcome to Fort Vancouver Regional Library's 2024 Revolutionary Reads series. This year's series focused on the book Free: 2 Years, 6 Lives, and the Long Journey Home by Lauren Kessler. This year's program was built in partnership with our community organization, the Foundation, Restore and Prepare, and is made possible through generous support by the FVRL Foundation. Thank you for your interest in this program, and as always, thank you for using your public library. Revolutionary Reads is an annual community reads program with the goal of galvanizing the Southwest Washington community to read the same book on a topic of revolutionary importance. Revolutionary is defined as involving or causing a complete and dramatic change, and or radically new or innovative, outside or beyond established procedure, principles, etc. The 2024 program focuses on the experience of incarceration and reentry. This series will explore the challenges, systems, and supports that exist in Southwest Washington for those returning home.
I'm going to start with a brief introduction to institutional library services, and then we're going to move into a Q&A. If you all have any questions, please drop them in the comments. And without further ado, I will, if I can figure this out, share my presentation. Okay, the title of our presentation is Beyond Books, Behind Bars, and that is a little bit of a riff on some of the language that you frequently see, books behind bars, books beyond bars. These are very common, and we obviously, well, maybe not obviously, we're more than just books. So if you're a library user, I'm sure, aware that libraries are more than just, books on shelves. So we are going to introduce ourselves. We're your presenters. Jen, would you start?
Thanks, Anna. Hi, I'm Jen Hawes, and I am the branch librarian at Glen Children's Center, which is a medium maximum security facility for youth in Snoqualmie, Washington. And I have been with ILS since July of 2022. And I've been at Echo Glen since September of 2022. Before that, I taught high school and was a high school librarian in Washington State.
Hi, I'm Joanne Percy. I work at the Washington Correction Center for Women, and I'm coming up on my first full year working with institutional library services. Before that, I was in academic and public libraries on the east side of the state, and I've been working in libraries for a really long time.
And I am Anna Nash, and my location is listed as the Washington State Library because I felt a little weird to write anywhere and everywhere. I am a support role. I have a support role with institutional library services. I've worked for ILS for coming up on 15 years. I have worked in like 6 different branches. The Washington State Reformatory, which is now partially closed, the Twin Rivers Unit, the Washington Correction Center for Women, the Washington Correction Center, Stafford Creek Correction Center, and I supervise the psychiatric hospital libraries. Before this, I was a student, so really this is almost my entire career, but I have worked in libraries since I was a youth. And Institutional Library Services is a program of the Washington State Library, a division of the Office of the Secretary of State. It has existed in some form for more than 60 years. And we provide library services through partnerships with the Department of Corrections, which is our services to prisons, the Department of Social and Health Services, which is our service to psychiatric hospitals, and the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, which is our service to juvenile rehabilitation or juvenile facilities. The services that we've been able to provide in the places that we have existed has changed a lot over 60 years. As you can imagine, that's quite a long time. I selected this image of a map from 1991 to show kind of the ebb and flow of services. So this map shows 16 branch libraries, 16 deposit collections. So that is collections in locations that don't have a staff attached, and included places like veterans homes, and 8 grant sites. So locations where an organization would receive funding for purchasing material. And today we have 9, I'm sorry. It was 10 for a little while. 10 Department of Corrections branches, 2 Department of Social and Health Services branches, and we recently added a DCYF location, Echo Glen, Jen over there. So we, that ebb and flow of budget. For a long time, it was just flow. But we recently had some ebb, which is very exciting. We had 10 branches for a little while, but I previously mentioned the reformatory closed, sort of. And then we added Echo Glen, which is very exciting. And we received funding through efforts led by Representative Hansen from Kitsap to add a second staff person at each of our DOC branches, which is incredibly exciting. I've heard stories from the past where there were like so many people that worked for ILS that people didn't even know each other's names. And so it's exciting to be part of that history of addition instead of subtraction. So what I would like y'all to take away from this introduction is like, we're a library like any other. We frequently refer to it as the public library model, where we've got circulating and reference collections, books, magazines, newspapers, CDs, DVDs. Jen, I think maybe you have video games too, or is that coming soon? No, that's but we do interlibrary loan, we have reference support, we do programs like book discussions, and we have monthly observances, and we've got speakers that come in, and we really just operate like any library. And I kind of like to use the term community library instead of public library, just because we do specialize our services to our patrons. So there are a lot of things that we don't do that a public library does, and there are a lot of things that we do that a public library doesn't do. So I think community library is the most appropriate term, but we really we're there, we open our doors, our patrons come in, they check material out, they participate in programs and services. We've got, summer reading programs. It really is like, if you think of a public library, that's us. And we are actually unique in the United States in this. In Washington, we've got a physical library where patrons can come into. We have a budget for material, and has been low in the past. But we still have a budget to purchase material. We've got professional library staff present, providing the library services, and we are part of the Washington State Library, which is the most unique part of the model that we have. We are supervised by librarians who are, trained in what a library is, and we are partnering with our host agency. Across the United States, the level of service is wildly different. So one of our librarians from the Washington Correction Center worked on a project collecting addresses for prison libraries across the United States and territories. And she discovered how different library service is. And she applied for and received funding for a grant to address the disparities among library services in state and territorial prisons. So I wanted to point that out. It's very exciting. We're also proud of her. The website is live, but it doesn't have content yet. So if you are interested, please feel free to add something in the comments and we can give you some more information. And before we move into our next thing, I just want to put a pitch for our job openings. Jamie let me know that we are probably going to get questions about how you can support institutional library services. And the thing that we need most right now is staff. We got funding for the additional positions, which I had mentioned before, which is very exciting. And we had some vacancies. So our positions are a professional, a librarian position, and a paraprofessional position. So if you know anybody with a library degree or with library experience who is interested in providing services to people who are incarcerated, please, please, please share our openings. So with that, I am going to switch to a different presentation, which is we're gonna ask each other questions, and we're gonna have some photos kind of cycling through. So there's something fun to look at instead of just our talking heads. So while I cue that up, Joanne, do you want to ask the first question?
Absolutely. Okay. So one of the things that's very common for people who work in this community to acclimate to is language. And there's been a lot of work done in recent years to be considerate about the language we use with regards to incarceration. Anna, can you elaborate on that for us?
Yes, I would be happy to, Joanne. So this is actually a conversation that comes up a lot. Like what's the right language to use? And one thing I'll say is like language changes all the time. So that is first and foremost, the language that's used today is not the language that was used, a couple of years ago. And I feel confident that it will change in the future. So for instance, when I started, I was told to use the term offender to refer to people who are incarcerated. And this is something that a lot of different people, they get used to the language that they use. And what I would say, well, first of all, I prefer to use people who are incarcerated or incarcerated individual. The Department of Corrections has recently moved towards use of incarcerated individual in policies and documentation, which is exciting because it was really hardcore. Like if you don't use the word offender, you are a risk to the safety and security of the institution when I first started. So I'm really excited to see that the Department of Corrections is taking the language that we use seriously. And we've got a resource in a resource list that will be linked to the presentation page about language recommendations written by people who are or were incarcerated. It's from the Marshall Project and it's called the Language Project. And I highly recommend, if you are interested in learning more about the language that's used and the thought process behind the different languages, that you check that out as a resource. Because ideally we are getting the information about, quote unquote, correct language from the people who are impacted by the language we use. And so honoring their preferences is very important. And I will say, I don't think that there is correct language, but there is definitely incorrect language.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I remember someone talking about the fact that when we talk about their units or their cells, we're not supposed to call it their home. And I was heading up a program just a couple of weeks ago, and I thought I made the mistake at the time of saying, okay, so when you go back home, can you can work on blah blah blah. And then I caught myself, and I was like, oh gosh, I'm sorry, did I say the wrong thing? You probably don't think of this as your home. And I actually got a lot of the women in the in the library at that time were like, no, it is. That's our home right now. So that's what we call it. So it does depend on individuals at each facility.
Yeah, I really have to stop and consider the language that I use, because there's official language that DCYF, Department of Children, Youth and Families, uses to refer to my patrons. And because I have a background in education, I always want to say kids, and they're not. Some of them are. Some of the kids I serve are 10 years old. We have up to 25 with women. So I have to stop myself. And I asked them one time, well, what do you want me to call you? And quite a lot of them said, we don't mind if you say incarcerated individual, because we want people to know, yes, we did something, but now we're trying to do something better with our lives. And I love that it's You know, if this is what they want me to call them, that's what I'm going to refer to them as. So I think a lot of it is taking cues from the community themselves.
Yeah, and there is also some like, what are you comfortable with? Because I remember having a conversation with a clerk who had a strong preference for convict. And I wanted to honor preferences, but I also was not comfortable calling somebody a convict. So I think there is kind of that like, no individual represents their entire community, and, the language that is, you know, appropriate to one person is maybe not to another. And, it is just something that requires some thoughtful, navigation.
Thank you. Next question. What do your patrons like to read?
So we get this question a lot, and really, it's the same as everywhere else. Because our locations are prominently one gender, a lot of our facilities are separated by gender. We do have trans patrons, so it's not exclusively one gender. None of our facilities are exclusively one gender, but that really impacts the reading interest. So, for instance, at many of the facilities that I worked at before I worked at the women's facility, nobody read Danielle Steele. Like, it was zero circulations. And then I got to the women's facility and I could not keep them on the shelf. So that definitely impacts interest. We also are serving a relatively small group of people. So the facility, I'm covering the Stafford Creek Correction Center right now. We've got an opening there in case anybody's interested. I'm covering the Stafford Creek Correction Center right now, and that hovers around 2,000 people. So that is pretty small, and that is one of the largest facilities. Some of our facilities are like below 100 people. So when you're talking about such a small group of people, one person can have a ton of influence. So that is also impacts our use. One person gets really hot for lit RPG, and all of a sudden everyone's reading lit RPG nonstop.
Oh, yes, that is so true. And for me, like I said, well, I have males and females, and I have age 10 up to age 25. So it's a pretty wide range. But if I had to pick one thing, and Anna's right, we get this question all the time. What do they like to read? Sorry, I keep saying kids, my patrons, by and large, they love nonfiction. The younger ones are, and even some of the older ones, really, really into the I Survived books. I don't know if any of you remember that series of books from like middle school. They love all nonfiction. They really want to read about people like themselves. And when all else fails, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, even the 24-year-olds.
I think things have changed a little bit at WCCW. Steele is not the go-to person anymore. Fantasy fiction, a lot of fantasy fiction is huge, really, really popular. The Sarah J. Maas books are very popular. So basically anything fantasy with werewolves, vampires, big nonfiction. We have a really big section for like tarot and crystals, dreams, that kind of thing. And I cannot keep those on the shelves. They just fly off. I feel like I've got a ton of them and you never see them on the shelves. So there's holds on everything. But we're really lucky. We have got a good budget for, collection development. And I get a lot of books from a local bookstore in Hillsborough, actually, Liberty Bay Books, that have provided us with books on runes and tarot and, witchcraft and all that good stuff. So.
Yeah, that reminds me, one thing that I think people would be surprised about, though probably not upon reflection, is dictionaries are really popular. Our patrons do not have access to the internet or technology that autocorrects spelling for them. By and large, some students, we'll get into that later, maybe, but dictionaries are really popular. I think I have like 30 dictionaries in the collection at Stafford Creek, and I'm
Mhm.
lucky if there's one available when a patron requests one.
And the encyclopedia.
Oh,
Those of
yes.
us who grew up without the internet, we know what's in those encyclopedias. These kids, the best comment I got was, whoa, it's like the whole internet in the books. And I just said, yes, that's what it is. It's the printed internet.
The printed internet. I love it. I do want to quickly touch on Western State Hospital. So the presentation is focused on, or not Western State Hospital, but the hospitals. This presentation is focused on library services to people who are incarcerated, but service to people who are in psychiatric facilities is really important to us as well. So one of the things that I did not realize until I started serving the hospitals, nonfiction is huge. Like the percentage of nonfiction circulation to fiction circulation it's nothing I ever experienced in my library career. And texts specifically on their diagnosis are very popular. A lot of people who are in psychiatric hospitals are there until they are recovered, and they're going to do their darndest to recover. So it's exciting to be able to provide that as a service. To Joanne freeze. She looks so focused.
I believe Joanne froze.
I believe Joanne froze.
Well, until Joanne unfreezes, Anna and I will continue. So we have talked a lot about, and those of you who are library patrons, you know that libraries are more than just books. And Anna mentioned that in the introduction. It's the same for us. We have lots of programs and partnerships. Yeah, so Anna, what are some things that you have at Stafford Creek maybe that is like an exciting program that you've done in the past or that you have coming up soon?
So unfortunately, I can't tell you about an exciting program coming up at Stafford Creek because we've got a job opening there, and we are pretty bare bones services. So thank you for that opportunity to plug the openings again.
But what about the past? Because you've got
yes.
You've got some great stories.
This actually is a photo. I'm over there in the corner talking about the Hunger Games. So my favorite programs are book discussion groups. I just love them. They're near and dear to my heart. It's a great way to get to know our patrons and their interests and their perspectives. So my first book discussion program was Cannery Row. And I've, done dozens over the years. It's just lovely. I also want to plug our monthly observances. Poetry Month is super exciting. It was one of the things that's really exciting about these positions is our supervisor is very supportive of us coming up with ideas. And we do have to have it like a little bit fleshed out. Like it's not just like, I'd love to, give away free money. We have to be considerate, but we do have the ability to develop programs. So I was instrumental in developing a Poetry Month program that was so exciting. I did not really care about poetry beforehand, but I saw how much our patrons loved it. And the ability to share themselves, to share their art with other people was just fantastic.
Well, we can come up with ideas and pitch them. And if we pitch them well, and we've got the funding for it, then I will say that our program director is very amenable to giving us some of that leeway to provide for our patrons, however it works best for us. So that was a great segue into my summer reading, which I'm very excited about this year.
I am too.
Last year's summer reading was incredible. The patrons read a collective 3,500 hours during the 8 weeks of summer. Somebody said, how do you know they didn't lie? And I was like, you know what? They wrote stuff and they had conversations with me. So even if they did, I don't even care. They got excited about coming to the library. This year, we are we're using one of the national programs, and it's Adventure at Your Library. And I can't do field trips or things like that, obviously, with my patrons, but I got approval to bring in a mobile petting zoo to kick off summer reading. I'm so excited about it. I and the staff may be more excited, than some of our patrons, because they're like, what day is it? I want to make sure I'm working that day. So we have Animal Encounters, which is an organization in Issaquah. They are coming in. They're bringing wallabies and bunnies and goats and chickens and sheep. And we're doing a reptile encounter. And they, of course, will have books that align with that as like the big kickoff. But that's really exciting for me. And then one of the other things that we have coming up that we're looking forward to is that the state library applied for a grant to provide therapeutic tabletop role-playing games. And we're going to do a kickoff at Echo Glen. We have our grant recipient that we were able to choose, and they are coming out next week. And this is not specifically a library program. It will start with us, but the hope is that it will continue. And I think that their plan is to create some type of a manual that can be replicated in any library for a variety of therapeutic uses. And Joanne, you're back.
I am. Sorry about
You're
that.
back. Yay. I mean, at least it froze on a great shot of you and
Oh,
not
sure did.
silly.
You were looking great.
But Joanne, you've got a little bit more info about the current state of RPGs in our institutional library services.
Right. So we are trying. There's a lot of interest in various of the facilities. Airway Heights is trying to pioneer this in their facility right now. Russell Rowe is he put forth a proposal which was loved by our program manager, and now he is in the stages of crafting a proposal for DOC. And there's a lot of fine details to tweak, because there are things that are allowed and are not allowed in a library space and in the facility itself. So you've got to get around that. You can't necessarily use minis. So you can definitely, people have played D&D with just paper and pen, and you can absolutely do that. But like I said, right now it's still in the early stages of the proposal. I chatted with Russell earlier, and he's like, we're getting there, but we've still got things to work on. I've talked about it with the people in my library, and they're really excited. We have a bunch of the books already, the monster manual, the guides and whatnot. Really, really excited for when it does happen. I did catch. I left and came back, and I caught that you were talking about poetry, Anna, and we had the Washington State Poet Laureate Ariane True visit us in October last year, and the people loved it. It was a wonderful program, and she really wanted to come back. We had some issues trying to facilitate that, but one thing I realized when I was hosting that program with her was that there was a huge interest in writing at WCCW. So that's something we've been doing. I started a writing program, a library writing program. So that's monthly, and everyone is like, please make it more often. Can we have it every 2 weeks? I'm like, I'm not sure if I have the bandwidth for that at this point, but I definitely, I get their excitement. That's wonderful. And we've had, one thing I'm trying to do is to save my sanity a little bit, is to have Humanities Washington speakers come in as well to kind of supplement that program. So I've been getting them in every other month. I've had a couple of authors come in already, and it's just been wonderful. It's been really, really great just to hear, get the feedback from the people that have attended these programs. So
yeah,
great.
Humanities Washington is so fantastic. They actually reached out to us before we reached out to them. We didn't know that they existed, and they contacted us. One of their speakers contacted us to have a program inside, and it's been such a wonderful partnership. And they increase the number of programs that they can provide because they know like how difficult it is for us. So A+, we love you, Humanities Washington.
We do. Anna, I think you're asking the next question. I know I missed one.
I think it's Jen.
It is
Oh.
me. Sorry. I
Okay.
can't read, which is unfortunate for a librarian. So we have actually talked about some really great programs. We could probably do a whole hour just about programs, but we won't. But one of the really important services that ILS provides is reentry services. And Anna, you were kind of instrumental in creating and organizing the reentry services program, and turned it into this incredible binder and wiki of information. Sorry, no binder. It's a crate of information. It's a delectable delight of information. But would you talk a little, because I actually don't know the entire history of how this began with
the
ILS.
Evolution of reentry in ILS.
Yeah, the evolution.
Yeah, so ILS has provided reentry information for as long as I can remember. It started as binders, so I find binders a little bit.
So sorry.
But really, like, it's been an evolution. And when I started, there was not a focus on reentry, but there also wasn't a focus on reentry statewide. And a couple of years into my employment, there was this like sea change in Washington. The lore that I have heard is that there were like higher ups in like the Attorney General's office and the Department of Corrections and some community organizations who were like, this has got to change. And it did. And I don't know how long after this like decision on their part was to like change the culture of reentry, we got wrapped up into it. But it started with attending something called a Summer Institute. That's put on by the Community Partnership for Transition Solutions, CPTS. There's CPTSs across Washington. If you're interested in getting involved in reentry, I can't recommend enough that you get involved with them. And I kind of like had this like, we could do so much more. And we often get questions like, what do libraries have to do with reentry? And it's information. We are information professionals. Our job is to collect and organize and provide information. And one of the things that I saw and found quite frustrating is like individuals would know what existed. Like I might know 10% of the services available to people, and another person might know 7%. And like the overlap is barely any. And like, so I found that quite frustrating. And then the binders that we had were difficult for our patrons to navigate. And we were then making judgment calls about like what was good enough to include. They were difficult to update. And so there was initially a move to have a website that had all of this information. So we started the ILS Reentry Wiki, and the information that is on the site is built through networking and also questions that we get from patrons, but the organization is also based on feedback from patrons. So one of the things that was very frustrating is someone would go through a housing binder and there would be information that like, 70% of the information is King County and there's nothing for their county, but they would have to go through the information to figure that out. So that's the Reentry Wiki. And then we started expanding what we did. We started soliciting our patrons to request reentry information. We started advertising it. And one of the things that we needed to do that to serve our patrons well and then not like, have our staff's head explode is to support staff in answering those reentry questions. So we, it's a group of people, like there were a lot of people involved and I had a big role in it, but I definitely was not alone. we identified a lot of the most common questions and a lot of the questions that we needed to ask as follow-up. So a lot of people are interested in driver's license, but we need to know if their license was suspended so we can give them the most appropriate information. So created this form to solicit questions, and then we created support documentation for our incarcerated clerks who are helping us fill these questions and for the staff who are finding specialized information. So
awesome.
yeah.
Thanks.
I totally agree with you when you were talking about the 10% here, 7% there. That's what I have found at WCCW. There's a lot of reentry information out there, but it's in different departments. It's with counselors, it's with the library, it's with the education department. And what I had previously found was that none of us actually knew that the other people were doing this. So what I got discovered by accident, there's a wonderful group right next to the library called the Women's Village, and it's basically a homegrown group of women who they have several focuses. Education is one of them. Re-entry is huge for them, so they actually have monthly meetings, subcommittees, etc. They work with Rotary, and they put together a lot of information for people who are coming up on their release, or even just 2 years out from their release. And they came to me one day and told me that there was a re-entry fair happening last October. I had no idea about it. No one had told me about it, even though we do so much re-entry work in the library. And it was wonderful. I got to see, all the other pieces that I had been missing. And I got to talk to people right there, gave them out I had so many forms. I gave out so many forms. And of course, then I got all those forms back at once, which was a lot, but it was great. And since that time, I have been filling re-entry requests. It's just gone off the charts, and it's been wonderful. We meet now, the Women's Village and myself, in the library once a month, and they will focus on various things. Right now, they're focusing on getting donations for clothing, because that's something that they don't have enough of for people who are leaving. They have a lot of professional clothes, but they don't have clothes that you would just want to wear generally. So there's a lot of things going on.
Yeah, things are a little different for me at Echo Glen, because some of our patrons are here for a couple of months. Some are here for longer, but often because of the age group that I serve, they may leave here and go to a group home before they release or parole. So it's a little bit different. And when we first started here at Echo Glen, Laura Sherbo, our program director, and I spoke with someone who was doing the reentry work. And he was thrilled that we had these, that like a form, and that we had a process. And so I'm sort of in between where reentry started and where it is for Anna and Joanne, because there are so many moving parts. I'm just an influencer of reentry, but there's so many moving parts, and it has to be that way because we work with primarily minors. But that being said, one of my clerks is also a policy intern for Team Child, and she has done a lot of work for kids who are re-entering, even if they're going to a group home. So she's taken the form that I adapted from what Anna created and have adapted it for the use of my population. And so I am starting to get a few more. I'm working with some of the living unit managers too. So it's a little bit different for me, but I think the fact that they know that they have the opportunity, honestly, mostly what they want right now is the driver's license books, because come on, you remember when you were that age and you were waiting to get your driver's license. So that's the big thing that they really want, and library cards for when they re-enter. So it's a little bit different from the experiences of my colleagues here.
Well, what an appropriate segue. I see that we are pretty close to the end, so I'm going to skip to our last question just to make sure that we have some time to answer some of the community members' questions. And if it's like crickets over there, I haven't been monitoring the chat. Maybe we can come back to some of the other questions that we had. So We obviously couldn't do what we do alone. In addition to our partnerships with the DOC, DCYF, and DSHS, are there any other partnerships you'd like to highlight? And I would like to start off with highlighting our library card project. The library card project was something that we started in 2017. It was the brainchild of our program manager. Why can't patrons release with library cards? And guess what? They can, and we can make that happen. So we have partnerships with library districts across the state. Our newest member of the library card project is Fort Vancouver Regional Library, which resulted through Jamie, I'm so sorry, I forgot your last name, reaching out to us. And they had heard about this program and wanted to pick it up and make sure that FVRL was serving their returning citizens. So that's the one I want to highlight.
Okay. One of the biggest partnerships that we have at WCCW is the residential parenting program. We have an early head start on site. This program is not new. It's been going on for many years, but it is wonderful for the women and babies. It does have some strict limitations. It's like a 30-month. The sentences must be 30 months or less, and the women coming into that program then must be pregnant. They don't, they can't come in with a child already. But it's just there's a lot of research out there that has that they've done to say that the kids that come in, the babies that come in, have no traumatic experiences. They are basically bonding with their moms when they should be, and they get out at that 30-month limit or less, depending on their sentences. And it's just such a wonderful program for these mothers and the babies. So, and we are working with them as well. We have donations of books from various places, Aunties in Spokane, and the name is escaping me right now. Queen Anne's, I think.
Queen Anne Book Company.
Yeah, and then we also do our own baby story time, so baby reads for the
And
moms
I think
too.
Anna started that, didn't she?
I didn't start it. I took it over. I don't remember who started it. It was another state library staff person, but I did do it for several years, and I just absolutely loved it.
When I tell the story, I say it's you.
I also didn't actually make the form, but
whatever. I'm just handing out misinformation left and right here. We at Echo Glen, there are honestly, most of our collaborations happen because of DCYF. So it's programs that perhaps DCYF has set up, and I am working with, for example, the program director. She is a DCYF employee who has set up certain things. For example, there's an LGBTQ group that meets in the library. There's a new addition to our calendar is a group called Unkitawa. It's a Native American heritage and culture group, and they once a month they meet in the library and they go through some Native American like crafts and talk about the impact of it in the history. And they actually allow the patrons to create items. And then the other time that they come on campus in the month is for a sweat lodge, which obviously does not take place in the library. We also help support Issaquah School District, who runs the school at our facility, as well as Pongo Poetry. They have done some work in the library as well. So we're really lucky that we are a presence here and that we have these other groups in the community who see the value in the library and want to partner with us. So it takes a lot of stress off of how do I get things happening, because there's so much. It's often choosing what we can and can't provide. So yeah.
That's great. So I'm going to stop sharing. And Jamie, do we have some questions?
We do. Leanna, do you want to read them?
Yeah, sure, I'll do that. So I'll just say there was a comment that one of the attendees has similar solar eclipse pictures. So yeah, definitely things that we do. Okay, so one of the questions is, does the Department of Corrections dictate what materials are or are not allowed, or is that up to you?
Oh yeah, so that was one of the questions that we unfortunately couldn't get to. So the Department of Corrections does have a policy that says what publications are allowed and not, and we do follow that policy. So when we get material in, we do have to review it to make sure that it doesn't violate the DOC policy. So yes, they do sort of, they dictate what we can't have. I'll say that. They dictate what we can't have, but we do have collection development policies that drive what we collect, you know, outside of that. So.
Okay. The next question is, how do you handle overdue books?
Somebody else want to?
We send out overdue notices, and I know that when they get things through, we call it distro, so through their internal mail service, they're usually pretty excited, because if it's a packet, if it's an envelope, it's an exciting thing. Unfortunately, they know exactly what an overdue notice looks like, and it is not exciting at all. But, yeah.
A little different for me at Echo Glen because we don't have that kind of a distribution center. We currently have 114 residents, so it's much smaller. And my patrons come into the library usually twice a week for about an hour at a time. But often because the library is attached to their school, they'll run by and like hold a book up. I've got it, or put it. Our drop boxes out in the hall. And I'm lucky that there haven't been huge issues. The primary issue for me is that they will often switch their living unit and things get kind of lost in the shuffle. So that's working with the cottage staff to get the material back.
We do usually have enough information to be able to tell if somebody has lost it because they lost control of the item. That box that was featured in the slideshow is that when people move around the institution, oftentimes their books are left where they were before. And we, in some of our places, like go and retrieve them from the unit because it can be very difficult if it's not checked out to somebody to get that item back. But we don't charge fines. A patron may lose their borrowing privileges if they have overdue material.
Okay. The next question is, are there ways to donate actual books to your system?
We have wish lists, which are linked to the resource page. Right now, so sorry, I really am just going wild on the job openings. Right now, our capacity is very limited because of our vacancies. And so we don't really have the capacity or space. We used to have a lot of space where we would store donations. We don't really have capacity to accept donations of personal material. Hopefully that will change in the future. If you recruit someone for us, then I'll let you donate material. And it is very helpful. So I don't want to like discount it as wonderful. Like we've had some really fantastic relationships with people who've gathered donations for us in the past. But the best way to support us right now through donations is through links to our wish lists, which is on the resource page.
Okay, and somewhat related, do you know if the Vancouver jail is still accepting paperback book donations?
We are not part of the jail system, so I don't know. I do highly recommend that you reach out to them. Jamie,
I can answer this one. I can answer this one. So our community partner in Revolutionary Reads, the foundation, actually recently reached out to the Clark County Jail, and they're actually working with them to get more books in there. So you're welcome to bring your books to donate to the Clark County Jail at our foundation event on April 25th at the downtown Vancouver branch. But in general, the last thing we heard from the Clark County Jail was that paperback books can be left at the front desk in care of the chaplain department in sacks or boxes. They do not accept hardback, leather-bound, wire, spiral books, and magazines. So none of that stuff, just paperback books. And the things they're specifically looking for are Westerns, science fiction, mystery, adventure, biographies, historical, self-help, foreign languages like books in Spanish and Russian, educational, and romance. So yes, they are accepting stuff. And if you want to bring that stuff to the event on April 25th, that is our local resource fair to get people connected with individuals working in the area to support incarcerated individuals and reentry folks. So yes, I have an answer. Hooray.
Very exciting.
Okay, another question is, how do your patrons access the internet?
The short answer
Well,
is that they don't.
some of mine do.
Yes. So
Sorry, go ahead, Anna.
no, you go.
My patrons who have their GED or who have graduated from high school and are taking college classes have limited access to the internet for the purpose of their education. There are also, I mentioned earlier, one of my clerks who is a policy intern for Team Child. I have another patron who is an intern for Justice for Girls Coalition. So they have limited email and limited internet access, either in their living unit, it's supervised, or in the school building. As you can imagine, a lot of sites are restricted for them. So that's, at least for Echo Glen, that's what they have access to. And I don't know if you and Joanne, if your patrons have access.
We do not. So that is one of the services we provide at the library. They'll put in information requests, and I will then search the internet for whatever information they are looking for and provide it to them, whether it's medical research or just a cute picture of a polar bear.
The Department of Corrections is working on getting a heavily filtered internet. I believe there are pilots in place right now through the education programs. So I know that it is something that they are working on. And I am hopeful in a way that I haven't been in the future. Like every time I would see like internet's coming to prison in the past, it was always kind of like, well, I'll believe it when I see it. But it does seem to be happening, which is very exciting. So ask us again in a year and hopefully we'll have a different answer.
Okay, a couple more questions, and I'm going to add on to this one. Is there a library at every correctional facility? And then this is my addition. I saw the maps that you were showing. There wasn't a lot in Southwest Washington. So is there a way that people can advocate for that?
So we have libraries in every, so there's different types of incarceration. I'll take a step back. There's different types of incarceration. There is jail, which is at a county and sometimes city level, but that's not my expertise. So don't quote me on that one. So there's jail, which is at like a municipal level, I guess I'd say. And then there is prison, which is state or federal. And then there's like juvenile detention, and then there's, the two layers, the municipal and state in that as well. So our specialty, or like our, the areas that we are working with is the state level. So within the state system, we have a library in all of the medium and above custody facilities, and one of the juvenile detention centers. Jen, what is the phrase? Should I use children's center?
Juvenile rehabilitation.
Juvenile
residential.
So
there is one in Chelan, a center there for men, for boys and men. We do not have a facility in there. Maybe someday.
Yeah. So our contract with the Department of Corrections does not cover a physical library in the minimum facilities, but we do provide library services to them via an interlibrary loan program where we lend from our facilities where there is a physical location to the people who are in the other locations. And we don't work with any of the jails. I know that there's a lot of outreach to jails from different library systems, but it is quite inconsistent. So. Oh, and then in terms of Southwest Washington, there's not, there was Larch, but Larch closed, and it was one of the minimum facilities.
Yeah, the Larch Center closure is actually what inspired us to get started on this path for this program, because people here were saddened that Larch Center closed. And then I can say on behalf of FBRL Libraries that we have been doing, we don't we used to have a reentry program with the Clark County Jail, which we're trying to get back up, but we do visit the juvenile detention center weekly. And we actually visit them twice now. We do once for just a general discussion on different things, and then we do take in and do an interactive, like crafting or making something project, so they get some access to that. They did stop motion last time, which was super cute. I got to see their videos.
Ooh, cool.
And we've been doing that since 1997. Well, not the crafting part, but the weekly visits we've been doing for a long time. And we manage the collection at the juvenile detention center as well. So.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things where like in the places where there is not like a dedicated staff person, it can be really amazing what can happen, and it's inspiring to see. Obviously, we love like a budget and a dedicated staff person and a physical space, but short of that is, there's some amazing work that people are doing.
Okay, I'll do this. One last question. Is there more access and or computer training when they are preparing for release, specifically for those that have been incarcerated for many years?
Yes, it is frequently offered through the education program in the locations where we work. So the Department of Corrections contracts with local colleges, and they have computer labs, and they actually have a pretty sophisticated laptop system to support their education. And my understanding from the people that I have talked to who are incarcerated is if you are interested in taking these classes, it usually doesn't take too long to be able to access them. That may be different from facility to facility, but there is support through the local colleges.